I swear the last words that come out of Desmond's mouth at the end of this game were the exact same words that came out of my mouth after I had finished it. Hello everyone, David here. Well, it's been about maybe a year or so since I last played Assassin's Creed for the first time, trying to get myself into the franchise, see what all the craziness is about and why the hell do they keep putting out a new game every single year. And after having played it, I said to myself, yeah, I will go ahead and give the next one a shot. And it's been a long time, so I thought to myself, I should go ahead and crack open what I had purchased a long time ago, the Assassin's Creed Ezio trilogy, and go ahead, play, and review Assassin's Creed 2. Now, quick note on the Ezio trilogy, it comes on just one disc, which is a little daunting considering that it contains 3 games, but it's actually kind of neat because there is a negative and a positive to this. The negative is that Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are digital, whereas Revelations is the only one that's actually on the disc. So when you pop it in, you're going to have to install Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood into the system, whether it be the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360. You have to install that onto your console, so you need that extra space, which is quite large because I think 2 was around maybe 6 gigabytes, so I'm assuming Brotherhood's going to be around the same, so you're probably going to need around 12 gigabytes of space, and that's to install it. But the positive is that you don't have to download it. They could have easily just put codes on the disc and then have it open up the PlayStation Store and say, oh, enter the code here, and now you can begin downloading Assassin's Creed 2 for free, which is awesome, but now you have to spend all this time downloading it, and then you need double the size, or double the space, because you need to download the install file, and then you need to install that file into the system in order to actually get the game. So you just need to put in the disc, install it, and you're good to go. You are going to need an awful lot of space, but it's better than to have to download it and wait all that time, especially if you have slow internet like me. So, onward with the review for Assassin's Creed 2. And in Assassin's Creed 2, Desmond Miles returns in order to enter the memories of his ancestors after the events of the first game, without getting into too much detail because it's a little spoilery. But let's just say that this time he has to enter a new ancestor. He has to enter the memories of a new ancestor that he hasn't entered into before, and that ancestor is named Ezio Auditore. And in 15th century Italy, Ezio witnesses a rather tragic event that sets a course of events that has him joining forces with the assassins in order to take the war to the Templars. And right there is your first positive about the game that has it automatically become better than the first one. I mean, I've heard so many people talk about this game, saying that it's definitely one of those games that you need to play on either the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360. If you own either one of those consoles, you need to play Assassin's Creed 2. But granted, you need to go through Assassin's Creed 1 in order to kind of understand the gist of the story for 2, even though it has a new protagonist in previous, in ancient history, rather than Altair. For the first game, you got Ezio. And that is where this game exceeds. 15 minutes in, I knew that this was going to be better than the first one, because you have a story that is, in my opinion, way deeper than the one in the first one. Granted, it's nothing that original. Guy witnesses a rather tragic event, and so therefore he is hell-bent on revenge, and in order to do that, he has to join the assassins in order to be able to extract his revenge upon the Templars. And like I said, that's not necessarily that much of an original story, but it's way deeper than the one in the first one, because if I remember correctly, and if I don't, then please tell me, because it's been quite a while since I played the first game. I believe that the 2 narratives that we had in the first Assassin's Creed was the one of Desmond and the one of Altair. And I remember saying that the one for Desmond was, in my opinion, way more interesting in that first half of the game than the one for Altair, because Altair, all he really did was do all these assassinations that the old guy kept sending him to go do, and then come back, rinse and repeat. It was the same thing over and over until the third act, where the story started to flesh out just a little bit, but by then I started to feel like the story was becoming a little bit too mundane on Altair's side. Whereas Desmond, I was genuinely curious to see what's going on with Abstergo and why is he there. The questions that he had were practically the same questions that I have. In this game, Desmond's questions not only reflect that of my own, but I was genuinely invested in the story for Ezio, because not only was it a deeper story and a much more compelling and sympathetic story, but Along with that, you bring us a much more compelling and sympathetic character. Altair was kind of one note for the majority of the story in Assassin's Creed 1, whereas Ezio takes an arc that I haven't seen in a while for a video game character. At the beginning, he's a ladies' man. He's he's nothing but trouble. He's very mischievous. He's kind of reckless, but they make him likable because he cares about his family, cares about his friends, and he's just an easygoing guy. He's the kind of guy that you go to bars with, and he's gonna get you into a little bit of trouble, but nothing too extreme that you're gonna want to stay away from the guy. But after this tragic thing happens, he doesn't necessarily switch because he still has parts of him where it's, good old Ezio being a little charming with the ladies and so on. But as time goes by, you can definitely see the effect that him wanting to extract revenge for this thing that happened take effect on his personality, and he generally takes an arc from the beginning of the game to the end where he's not the same guy anymore. And along with that, he's got an accent that I really do like, and I wish I could use that upon the ladies. Altair just talked like a regular dude. At least that's how I remembered. And the narrative of the story was, in my opinion, a whole lot cleaner than the first one, because in the first one, after every assassination that you pulled off as Altair, they would jump back to present day with Desmond and say, okay, here's a little bit more of information. Okay, now back into the Animus, rinse and repeat. Whereas here, there's a long time before you jump back into Desmond's story, and when you do, you're only in there for a little bit of a while, but it's very informative and very captivating. And then boom, back into the Animus, and you're there for quite a while. And that really makes us stick with Ezio a whole lot more, and like him a whole lot more. But they never found a way to make us forget about Desmond, because there would be moments where you would hear Desmond's voice echoing through Ezio's consciousness, because he's in there, and they will remind you that, hey, there's this bigger picture going on with Desmond and the people that he's now with, who are interesting characters, but I never really cared for them as much as I did for the characters that were taking place in Ezio's story, because those characters I really liked. They were a very diverse cast of characters, whether they be on the Templar side or the Assassin side, and they were cool to see, and they were cool to get to know, and they were great. My only little complaint about these characters would be that I understand that this is 15th century Italy, but despite liking some of these characters, some of them were a little stereotypical. And I understand that because it's 15th century Italy, it's technically not a stereotype, because that's kind of sort of how they were back then. But when you introduce a character who literally says, "It's a me, Mario," you may have dipped your toe across the line just a little bit. And my only other nitpick about the story, not so much the characters, would be the ending. I'm a little mixed on the ending, because there's part of me who's very interested to see what just happened. Because, like I said, what I thought was exactly what Desmond said right before we cut to credits, and I thought that was pretty hilarious. But then another part of me feels like this is something that I was expecting, because I've heard people talk about their complaints that they had with Assassin's Creed 3, and as hard as I tried, I couldn't avoid some foreshadowment of certain spoilers. But then that thing that people were complaining about shows up here at the ending of Assassin's Creed 2, so I'm like, okay, it's here, why couldn't people notice it before? And I don't know, there's just something about the ending that I'm a little confused by, and I felt like it ended a little too abruptly, but considering that I literally have the other two games here with me and I could start them at any moment, I guess I should feel privileged in that sense. Now, from what I believe, Assassin's Creed 2 is the only Assassin's Creed game in the franchise to not be released immediately a year after the previous one. It actually released 2 years after the first game, and I think that in that time they were able to take their time and polish up the graphics, because they looked better than they did in the first one. Now, maybe that's because this is the first game of the franchise that I actually played on my brand new high definition television, and maybe that plays somewhat of a role in my opinion for that. But I did think that the graphics looked a little bit more polished than they did in the first one. They're not perfect. We still have a little bit of texture popping, and when there's an awful lot of objects and characters and MCPs on the screen, as well as various environments, we do get a little bit of screen tearing as well as some frame rate issues, but they don't happen frequently enough to hinder the experience. But I thought that the voice work was better, the cutscenes were much more realized. I mean, from what I can tell, like I said before, Altair's voice was somewhat monochromatic, and I do like the personality that these people, that this cast were able to pour into their performances as these characters, especially the actor who plays Ezio as well as Desmond. They really got me, or he really got me. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't bother to look up if it was a different actor for both of those characters or if it was the same actor, but he or they did a great job of making me like these two characters and making me sympathize for them, and therefore finding a way for me to become invested in the story. My only nitpick about the voice work would have to be that you hit that particular point in the game where you start to hear the same audio or the same line of dialogue from characters in the background when you're exploring a city over and over again. How many times am I gonna hear a guy talk about his work as a blacksmith, or his maps, they're the best, they're worth the extra coin. And as for the cutscenes, I felt like they were more realized here in this game than they were in the first one, because in the first one, sure, they would have their scenes where you have characters talking to one another, but at any moment you were able to toggle the camera with the left analog stick. And call me old-fashioned, but I prefer the camera to be fixed on our characters in a very cinematic way, meaning I don't have control over the camera, and the camera cuts from one character to another, which is what we get in this game, as opposed to the first one where they would just have the camera here and our characters talking to one another, and then the camera would cut over here, but at any moment you can move the camera around, and therefore not making it feel very much like a cinematic and making me feel like something's about to go down. Now, the gameplay practically hasn't changed. It's pretty much the exact same thing as the first one, so I can't really comment on it too much, except for some brand new additions, mainly in the form of new kinds of inventions that you are provided with as the game progresses, such as an extra blade, that way you can kill two enemies at once, or a pistol that is hooked up to your blade, as well as another blade having a hollowed little line down the blade so that you are able to poison your enemy. Little things like that are very deserving to be in a sequel, because it's the kind of thing where you just don't put in your first game. You need to hold back some of your really cool mechanics and put them in the second game, and I think that they work their best here. And again, it's been a while since I played the first game, but I felt like the parkour mechanics from jumping from one building to another and then continuing your combination of leaps and bounds, I felt like that was a little bit more fluid and brisk, and I got to places a little bit quicker than I would have in the first game. But make no mistake, when I said that most mechanics from the first game return in this one, I really do mean most, including the ones that I dislike. Because you're dealing with parkour mechanics, there's going to be moments where you want to jump off a certain platform and onto another one, but for some reason it didn't register very well, and Ezio would just jump off the building and kill himself. It would happen to me, I don't want to say so many times, but enough times to where I can distinctly remember the times where I got frustrated because I needed to restart that particular segment of the mission all over again, whether it be to climb a very tall building or start a particular free run in order to get to a certain room that's only accessible through a free run, where I need to jump up from one platform to another and time my moves correctly. But there would be those moments where Ezio would just jump off of something that I didn't want him to jump off and kill himself. It was ridiculous. And another nitpick about the gameplay would be that, and this is not that much of a problem, like I said, it's very infrequent, but it does happen from time to time, and that is, sometimes you will come into contact with some of the MCPs, and because of a situation that just happened in the story, you may be a little bit notorious, so guards would be on high alert for you. So when you're walking down a hall and you barely nudge this one guy that's carrying a box, and then he'll just drop the box and be like, "You dropped my box, guards, guards!" And poof, you're running, trying to avoid these guys. And it's not particularly hard to get away from some of these guards, especially if you know what you're doing. But it does become a little annoying when the smallest thing could set some of these guys off. But in my opinion, I think the biggest complaint that I can think of with the gameplay would have to be the final boss, which I believe many have regarded to be one of the most anticlimactic boss fights in video gaming recently, because at first I didn't know what I needed to do. I'm like, what the hell's going on? How do I do this? But then Ezio does something within the cutscene of the boss fight that I'm like, this is typically something that the boss would do, not you. And after a while, I figured out the pattern, and as soon as you figure out the pattern, you're done. Just a few more, rinse and repeats of the thing that you were doing, and boss fight's over. And that's the end of the game. You're still hoping that Brotherhood and Revelations and the preceding Assassin's Creed games will have better final boss fights. But if you were really disappointed after beating the game because of the fact that it was a very anticlimactic boss fight, you have plenty of more stuff to do after the credits roll. The game lets you free roam, and there's a lot of stuff to do across the cities that you encounter in this game, such as there's just so many things, and I gotta be honest, there's a few that I can't really go into detail because they are a little bit spoilery, but let's just say that there's certain symbols that you can analyze, and they reveal certain backstory to what's going on between the Assassins and the Templars and what it is that they're after, as well as these feathers that you can collect and the viewpoints that you can synchronize with, as well as the one side quest that I think everybody's gonna do because it's somewhat easy to access and easy to do if you, like I said, if you know what you're doing. And by this time, you'll pretty much know what you're doing since you've played the game enough. But the one side quest that I'm talking about is obtaining Altair's armor. I'm not gonna go into detail of how you do it, but let's just say that it was one where I just couldn't pass up. And I believe an awful lot of people couldn't pass that up either. So yeah, I am going to drink the Kool-Aid and say that Assassin's Creed 2 is definitely a better game than the first one. It's one of the few instances where that is the case. And it is the kind of game that you definitely need to play should you own a PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, which is a little late to do so at this point considering that we're in a brand new generation of gaming. But it's definitely one not to pass up. And for that, I am going to go ahead and give Assassin's Creed 2 a 9 out of 10. But as much as I love this game, I still can't understand why Ezio is determined to be undercover and as sneaky as possible, yet he wears like the most flashiest getup. It's even flashier than Altair's. It's got this thing, it's got a cape. It's got a cape. But let me know what you guys thought of Assassin's Creed 2, and if you haven't played it, but you did enjoy my review of the game and would like to purchase it, be sure to use the link in the description below. It would really help me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.